Emotions. My parents got me VR goggles for Christmas. Not the nice ones that go specifically with my phone, but some cheap knockoff. I guess the Dream Machine would get the job done. But it's not a name brand thing, but I can only imagine the headset designed for my phone would work better or look nicer than the off-brand one. But, oh well, I appreciate that they got me what I asked for Christmas. We don't have much money, so they do what they can. As soon as I opened the box, revealing my gift, I hooked up my phone and began my descent into the virtual world. The main menu brought me to a colorful living room surrounded by couches, a huge area rug, a minibar, and big windows overlooking a private beach on the ocean. It looked very nice. I was then prompted to insert headphones for a better experience, so I found the closest pair and put them on. I could hear the waves lapping outside. The sounds of the seagulls could faintly be heard when the waves rolled back into the oceans. It was so peaceful here. I was glad to call this place my new virtual home. I began to explore the games and different VR experiences the Dream Machine had to offer, and kept finding myself fascinated with the horror games. I've always loved a good scare. There were so many to choose from, but I opted for a free game to start out with. It was called Face Your Fears. While I waited for the game to install, I downloaded a few other apps: Netflix, Hulu, some escape room game, and a racing game. When I started up Face Your Fears, I was brought to a void with several doors to open, each one offering a different experience. I chose the door that looked like it belonged to a typical suburban house. The door opened and I was transported to a child's room. I was lying in a small bed, only able to move my head around. The room was filled with colorful toys. It looked like a child's dream room. Immediately to my right was a nightstand, followed by a door to what I assumed is the entrance to my bedroom. It was closed. The remaining wall was covered with a shelf of storage bins. Opposite of my bed was the closet, with a desk to the right of it. On my left was a door to the bathroom that was left slightly ajar, followed by a dresser with blocks on it, right in front of a set of windows with the shades drawn down. I could hear a storm outside, and what I assumed were raindrops hitting the window. I swung my head back towards the shelves, and my heart sank. Hunched over on the ground was a lanky, dirty, almost gray thing playing with one of the toys that was left on the ground. All I could do was watch as he lifted his head and cranked it towards me. We made eye contact, and he bolted to the other side of the room with a shriek. I looked over to the dresser where I saw him run, and I could see his head poking out from behind it. Before I knew it, he had scurried along the floor and was now in front or under my bed. I was starting to get scared. I couldn't see him. I then saw his fingers wrap around the floor. I saw his fingers wrap around the footboard of the bed as he slowly pulled himself up. He looked at me for a second and then vanished. I began frantically looking around the room trying to find him when I noticed something in the bathroom directly to my left. The door was still ajar, and I could make out the thing going crazy in there. He was running around and screaming. I turned away from the door, afraid he would jump out at me. Then I heard he stopped screaming, so I redirected my gaze towards the bathroom to see what was happening. There he was, standing right there at the side of my bed, just looking at me with his crazy eyes. I screamed and removed the headset. I started laughing at how intense that experience was, and I put the Dream Machine back on my head to try a different experience. I started up Netflix and was brought to a different living room. This one was overlooking snowy mountains and had a feeling of a ski lodge. I was sitting on the couch in front of my home theater-sized TV, and I was asking for my Netflix information. Beside the coffee table in between me and the TV, the only other object in the room was a set of stairs leading to an unachievable second floor. I began Always Sunny, and the lights in my ski lodge went dim. About 2 minutes into the show, I noticed something move above the TV screen. I figured it was just a lighting effect, so I didn't think anything of it. When it happened again a few seconds later, I followed the blur to the set of stairs. That creepy thing from the other game was on all fours crawling up the second floor. I blinked, then it was gone. Maybe I was imagining things. I resumed my show, and I enjoyed it for another 5 minutes when I noticed my vision becoming obscured on the left and right side of the screen. I focused my vision and realized what I was seeing. Dirty gray fingers. That thing was grabbing my head in the virtual world. I shifted my eyes up enough to see the thing starting to peek his head inside my view. His mouth opened and he started to scream louder than I heard him before. He started violently shaking my head. That was enough of that. I returned to the main menu and uninstalled Face of Fears. The app alone was great, but why was it leaking into my Netflix app? Well, I went back to their page to leave a review of my experience, but the app was gone, removed from the store. I was so confused. I just stood there in the main room for a few minutes listening to the waves and the seagulls as I figured out what to do next. And that's when I noticed there were no seagulls anymore. I looked out of the windows onto the shore of the beach. There was a red tide on the far end of the beach. In the middle of it was a gray figure surrounded by floating carcasses of white birds. The figure began moving towards me in an inhuman way. I looked away as if that would have stopped what was happening. I turned back around, expecting everything to be normal again, but on the window, written in blood, was, "I know where you live now." This all happened on Christmas morning, and I haven't used my VR headset since. I looked up Face of Fears online, and it appears to be a legit game, but no one has had experiences like mine. Well, I left a review of my entire experience to them, and they got back to me saying it wasn't a problem with their app, and that I should contact the makers of the VR product. That's when things got weird. I googled Dream Machine VR and nothing came up. I asked my parents where they got it, and apparently it was the last one available at the local electronics store. I'm off to go return these goggles and hopefully find out more about these weird occurrences. I'm gonna tell you a secret that I don't tell anyone. I'm a US veteran of the war in Afghanistan. I was stationed in a province when Taliban militants attacked our coalition base. I stood next to a man I knew since training when an RPG-17 rocket hit the 3-story building behind and buried us both alive. And I held the flag they sent home to his mother after I crawled out. I've tortured a man for information, threatened a child to coerce his parents to cooperate, and of the 7 people I know I've killed, only 5 are fighting back. But that isn't a secret, because I was just following orders. The secret is that when I'm laying awake at night thinking about all these things done to me, all the things I've done, I'm not traumatized by it all. The secret is I can't sleep because I miss it. Adrenaline, fear, excitement. It's all the same thing. I've been addicted to it for as long as I can remember. While other kids were riding skateboards around the neighborhood, you'd find me grinding along the railings of the rooftop. They threw water balloons. I threw rocks. They learned to drive. I organized street races with my brother. Well, by the time I graduated high school, I already had a juvie record for fighting. The cops sat me down with an army recruitment officer, and they told me my life had only 2 possible outcomes left. You're going to either keep playing at these stupid stunts until you get yourself locked up for life, or you're going to man up and become somebody. I told them I had changed, and the officer decided that past mistakes wouldn't disqualify me from enlisting. He was wrong for believing me. I just thought shooting guns sounded like a hell of a lot more fun than sitting behind bars. He was right that I would make a damn good soldier though. Sure, it wasn't all excitement, but my life had a purpose, and I could finally put my natural affinity to good use. And for the first time in my life, I was courageous instead of stupid, a hero instead of a freak. I didn't come home in a body bag like I had expected, but the wheelchair I got was even worse. The bullet between the second and third lumbar bones is still lodged in my spine, and that was it for me. I didn't know if I would ever get out of that chair, but even if I could, my days of living on the edge were over. And I hated it. I hated the army for kicking me out. I would have crawled back into battle if they let me. I hated my brother for the pity he gave me. I hated the boring town I was stuck in. And more than anything, I hated myself for not having anything left to live for. I wheel out to the end of my driveway every month to get the disability check they mail me. But besides that, I just sit at home and watch movies. War movies, horror movies, anything that could make me forget, even for a moment, that the most excitement I was ever gonna get was checkup time when the nurse leaned over my chair to measure my stagnant pulse. My brother tried to get me to go out with him more, but I couldn't stand being dragged away from my movies. I wish I could be inside them and never come out. That's when he came up with an idea for a compromise. "How about you and me go down to the new virtual reality arcade?" he asked. "They've even got some immersive horror, ones that are so real you'll piss yourself." "Huh, sounds like my everyday life," I replied. I ended up going just to shot him up, and the place was actually a lot cooler than I expected. The arcade was divided into two personal pods that looked kinda like spaceships. The assistant was a geeky Japanese dude, and spoke with a weird inflection which kept swinging back and forth. He probably spent his spare time making fan-made anime dubs or some nonsense. He helped me get set up with the headset and headphones, and made sure that the wheelchair didn't get tangled up in any of the wires. As you might have guessed from my introduction, not much impresses me. But holy shit, this technology has come a long way since the blurry 3D movies I saw as a kid. I found myself confronted with a menu hanging in the air which looked real enough to touch. I selected the hard genre, and then a few more options came up. Select your difficulty. Are you A, grandmother with a heart condition, kid with something to prove, SWAT team looking for practice, a lost soul seeking forgiveness from God? Well, the last one didn't really sound like a degree of fear to me, but they were organized to ascending difficulties, so I selected that. Any hope of a thrill immediately disappeared as a fat cartoon devil with a pitchfork ran across my field of vision. "Huh, I can see you," he said, waving his pitchfork at me. "Can you see me?" "No, because I'm not a stupid cartoon. You sure this game is for adults?" I spoke aloud. "Just you wait and see," the Japanese guy said. It was weird hearing him talk when I couldn't see him. I think he was still speaking, but the words were drowned out by the game's music, which started playing. It sounded like the bad haunted houses they try to push off on kids, full rubber spiders, cobwebs, and jars of intestines, which were just spaghetti and meat sauce. Well, my viewpoint was walking along a dark road at night, which led to a trap door in the ground like a cellar. The cartoon devil popped up again, and I physically prepared myself for death by cringing. I get that my brother felt as helpless as I did, and I know he's trying to do his best, which is more than can be said about me. I guess it wouldn't hurt to at least pretend to have fun. "For me, it's the space between you and the divine, infinite and eternal, inseparable and simultaneous," the devil said, his voice completely different than his last utterance. The words popped with a confusing static noise. It was almost as though instead of hearing the words, I heard only imaginable sounds except the words, and my brain filled in the missing space, just like it does with white lettering on black paper. "Are you scared yet?" I faintly heard my brother's voice through the headset. I shrugged and gave a thumbs up. The trap door opened, and I lurched in my chair as something hurt in my back as the viewpoint suddenly dropped into the earth. It felt impressively real, almost like I was on a roller coaster which plunged into the darkness. I heard my brother laugh at my reaction. I figured that's enough satisfaction for him. No more looking startled, or I'll never hear the end of it. I could faintly see mushrooms and rocks lighting the deplorable descent. I was continuing to accelerate as I fell, and I even felt wind blowing in my face. They must have had a fan on or something to make it seem more real. The devil was tagging along with me, but he kept glitching and lagging and getting left behind, only to suddenly reappear in front of me. Then I felt a blast of hot air on my face, and I closed my eyes. Well, guess this was it, folks. I must be in hell. I opened my eyes and squinted against the brilliant light. I always imagined hell being darker. Was this hellfire? My eyes started to adjust, and I could see the sun reflecting sharply off the wide, sandy slopes of where? Afghanistan? Someone was talking behind me in Dari, the most common language used there. I couldn't understand it, but I could tell the person was afraid. I turned my chair to shift the viewpoint until I saw an old man kneeling in the dirt before 2 US soldiers who had their backs to me. One of them was holding a picture of a teenage Afghani boy. "Do you know who this is? Have you seen him?" the first soldier asked. "Is this your idea of a joke, bro?" I spoke aloud. "Oh, your brother went to use the bathroom," the Japanese guy said faintly. "What kind of game is this?" I asked, but his reply was drowned out by the VR soldiers. The old man kept pressing his face against the dirt and shaking his head. One of the soldiers dragged him to his feet and shoved the photo in his face. "You know who this is, don't you? Why are you trying to protect him? Do you know what he's done?" This wasn't funny to me. I started to take off the headset, but the cartoon devil appeared in the corner. "I can see you," he said in a silly voice. "Can you see me?" Everything was playing so smoothly that it could have been real, except for the devil which kept lagging and glitching. He was little more than a jumping mass of mist-colored pixels. One of the soldiers kicked the man on the ground. As he pivoted his body, I caught a glimpse of my face under the helmet. Well, suddenly, I remembered who the old man was. Abdul Basar was a mystic who was suspected of sheltering Taliban operatives in his house. I didn't need to watch to know what happened next. I took my headset off and handed it to the Japanese guy. "Did my brother put you up to this?" I asked him. "I can see you," the assistant replied. He handed the headset back to me, but I pushed it away. "No duh, Sherlock. How did you get this footage? Can you see me?" he asked. His face froze for a second while he spoke, twisted halfway between words. There were a couple of empty pixels obscuring in his mouth, but I could tell he was smiling when he handed me back the headset. I touched his hand, warm and real. Well, I don't know what was going on, but this certainly captured my attention better than any movie. I slowly took the headset from him, and the assistant nodded and smiled while I put it back over my eyes. "Ha ha 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 ha," the cartoon devil laughed in a good-natured way. "I played a trick on you once for what you've done." There was a flash. I was beating Abdul inside a holding cell. Another flash. I was back in the desert next to the cartoon devil. I saw it for less than a second, like a single frame inserted into a movie. "Yeah, you tricked me all right," I answered, "but you didn't scare me." "You think I don't remember everything I saw? I wasn't scared then, and I'm not scared now." The scene suddenly dissolved and I was falling through the earth again. I seemed to be going deeper this time, because the tunnel was lit by flowing veins of lava now instead of mushrooms. I sat calmly in my chair, actually looking forward to what came next. I didn't know if I was drugged or having a stroke, or if the devil was really trying to teach me a lesson. But I was excited to see just how far the rabbit hole went. This time, it was pitch black when I stopped. Crashed would be a better word though, because I felt it. It was like my whole body had slammed into a wall. This trick could make me feel things? Could something here beat me or torture me? For a second, I actually did start to get scared. But then I reached out with my hands and felt carpet beneath my fingers. That's right, I was still in a VR arcade. I had just fallen out of my chair somehow, still wearing the headset and seeing nothing but the blackness I landed in. I pulled myself hand over hand and crawled back into my wheelchair. "Can you see me?" the staticky absence of words said. The devil rose in front of me, but his appearance had changed as much from that cartoon devil as his voice had. The shape was dark, but it wasn't just like the lights were off. Ordinary dark is the absence of light, but the presence before me was the impossibility of it. In that moment before him, I couldn't even remember what it was like to see, but I could still sense his form through the emotional weight it carried. His horns were as sharp as being stabbed by the love of your life after you sacrificed everything to bring her joy. His face was the burden of holding your dying father in your arms while both of you knew you could have saved him if only you tried harder. His body was the shape of a long life spent in quiet desperation after all living matter had wasted away and you alone remained to dwell upon your regret. "Twice for who you are," the presence said. He reached out to touch me, but I could not let him. Somehow I felt I could become like him, an unreal embodiment of misery and pain. If the presence of his being were to overlap with my own, it wasn't fear that made me rip off the headset. Fear is something consciously recognized in the brain. My terror was something much deeper and primitive, the sort of thing which stirred my ancient ancestors into action to prolong their own purposeless existence in the face of some greater dread of the unknown. I tore off my headset and headphones and threw them into the assistant's face. My brother wasn't there, and I wasn't gonna wait for him. I sprinted out of the building, bursting out into the bright, clear light of my familiar hometown. Boring. How could anything be boring about this place which brought me into this world and formed me into who I am? I ran as fast and hard as I could, taking in deep lungfuls of clean air which filled my body with hope and jubilation. I had my whole life ahead of me, and nothing I had done or been could ever change that. I couldn't remember the last time I felt this good. Hell, I couldn't even remember the last time I walked outside. Man, it hit me. I couldn't remember the last time I walked, because I couldn't walk. I slowed down and looked at my legs, pumping the concrete beneath me. I could feel the blood roaring in my veins and the pressure of my feet on the ground, but I could see that one leg lagged slightly behind the other even when I stood still. And that was it. And that it was filled with dead, blurry pixels. I walked the rest of the way home, just enjoying how good it felt to move, and trying not to look at my glitching legs. 3 times for what you will do, said the voice, which wasn't a voice. My brother was waiting for me at my home, although every instinct within me screamed within the common recognition that it wasn't really my brother. "Oh, but I can't trick you, can I?" His mouth moved, but it was the silly cartoon devil's voice which came out. "You're not scared of anything." I reached up to my face, but the headset wasn't on me anymore. I turned around and started walking upstairs as quickly as I could. My heart was pounding in my chest like a caged animal trying to escape. My brother, who wasn't my brother, followed me up to my room. "You think you're so strong, don't you? That you don't need anybody. But you know what? But there is no one else here. so you can tell me the truth. The sing-song cartoon voice was getting on my nerves. Wherever I wasn't in control. There was no point in trying to outrun something in my own mind. I turned around to face him. "I'm not afraid of you and your tricks. What do I have to do to get out of here?" I asked. My voice didn't even shake. I balled my hands into fists, and they were firm and ready. "Are you sure you want out?" he asked, but it was back in my brother's voice. "Your legs work here, but they won't out there." "I don't care. I want out," I said. "Why? Unless you really are afraid." He smiled, and it froze in a glitch. The face was so warped I could barely recognize him. I couldn't stand the look. I wanted to wipe that smile off. Then I would have to do things my own way. "I'm not afraid," I shouted, and grabbed him by the front of his shirt and punched him straight across the face. "You're the one who's trapped in here with me." "Then what do you feel?" he asked. The face felt solid, and I could feel the bones of his jaw moving from the impact. The instant I hit him, however, his face was replaced with Abdul. The old man stared and pulled a handgun from behind his back, but I punched him again, almost breaking my hand against his cheekbone. The face changed again, and this time I was looking into my own eyes. That was it. That was the way out. He was reeling from my blows, and I snatched the handgun from his limp grasp. "That's not gonna do anything to me." "You're right, it won't," I interrupted, my mind racing with the possibilities. "Because you were just pretending to be me. It will, however, work on me." I put the gun in my mouth and pulled the trigger. He jumped at me faster than humanly possible. It knocked my hand aside. The gun went off with a deafening ring, and he fell to the ground in a heap. "My turn," I said. I put the gun in my mouth, pleased to find that my hand still wasn't shaking. I pulled the trigger. "I can see you. Can you see me?" I opened my eyes in the hospital. A doctor was leaning over me, shining a light in my mouth. My head hurt like hell. I tried to nod, but a searing pain engulfed my awareness and I froze up, almost like a glitch. My father was sitting beside my bed. He wouldn't say a word until after the doctor left, but eventually he told me what happened. I had entered some kind of fit at the VR arcade and fell out of my chair, probably caused by the bullet shifting in my spine. My brother took me home and stayed with me to make sure I was okay. But I pulled a gun and tried to kill myself. Well, he managed to stop me, but the gun went off. It hit him. I shot myself after that, but the bullet went straight through my jaw and missed my brain. I want to go back to my old life. Hell, I want to go all the way back to day one and do it all again. But I'd settle for just a day. I used to think I had nothing left to hope for. I used to think I wasn't afraid of anything. Now, I know I was wrong about both, and that they were both the same thing. The static sneer, half contempt, half agony, glitching on my father's face. Everything seems real, but I keep seeing glitches. I can't tell whether this is real and the visuals are a result of my fit, or whether I'm still trapped in a virtual world. If it is real though, then I've killed my brother. If it isn't, then I might be trapped here forever. I don't even know which I'm more afraid of. So, after a year of nagging from some of my gamer buddies, I caved. I finally got myself one of those virtual reality headsets. I was soon about to find out that there was nothing virtual about them. Well, at first I was indifferent towards them, but once I started using it, I realized that it truly does live upon the hype. I even went ahead and got myself a swivel chair. Well, the experience was so immersive I often forgot that I was sitting on a chair, well, in my apartment, and not really soaring across the sky looking down on prehistoric animals and whatnot. We'll fast forward a few weeks, and it became a habit of mine to come home from work and lay a bag of chips next to me and watch Netflix on it until dinner time. Well, okay, so for those of you who have no experience with the VR headset, well, let me just tell you that it's identical to a real theater when you watch movies on it. You'll see yourself sitting in the middle of a cinema hall or whatever setting you choose, but all the chairs are empty. You can even look behind you, like 180-degree behind to empty rows of chairs. I'd always wondered what it'd be like to own a personal cinema hall, and this was the closest I had ever been to it, so it was pretty cool. So one day I come home as usual and followed tradition and decided I'd binge watch True Detectives. It was a weekend, so I wasn't worried about sleeping late, and my girlfriend was out of town, so I really had nowhere to be. I'm down 3 episodes of season 1, and I really gripped with the whole series. Half episode in, I hear a light thud, as if a door just closed behind me. I take the set off and look around, wondering who might have walked in, and I realize that there is no door behind me. I'm sitting against a window on my couch. I still get up and make sure that my door was locked, and to my satisfaction, it was. Well, I shrugged it off and continued to sit down and watch. So my weekend is up and I'm back to work. I walk in and to my delight, Kim is already there, my girlfriend. I chat with her for a while and catch up with her before our shift starts. Well, after a day of listening to entitled brats and putting on fake smiles when they try on clothes, I'm beat. I work at a store and we get a lot of people who come in who think they own the store and the people working there. Kim and I grab dinner and we decide to spend the night at my place since we've been apart for the weekend. It's about 1 a.m. and I wake up to get some water. As I'm making my way to my room, I hear a light thud behind me. I turned around and noticed the window in the hall was open. Well, I figured the wind must have blown the bathroom door closed or something. But to my surprise, it was open. Now, I didn't give much thought, partly because I was too sleepy, and partly because knowing someone else in there with you in the apartment makes you less likely to think negatively of such minor occurrences. I slowly dragged myself to bed and fall asleep once again. And to give you an idea, my apartment is a L-shaped. The smaller head is where the hall and bathroom is, and the longer head has 2 bedrooms opposite of each other with a storage room in between. The next day, I get home from work and watch a million Watch the Die on VR. I'm laughing and really enjoying myself when I hear the all too familiar thud behind me. I instinctively turn my head with the VR on and stare at the end of the hall, at the entrance. I see something. It's a dark patch, a little darker than the surroundings. You guys know liquid black, like the ink? Yeah, that kind. I restart the device and look up again. Still there. I figure it must have always been there, since I never really looked up there. And I continue watching the movie, and I'm laughing and suddenly stop. I'm overwhelmed by this realization that I'm not alone in my apartment with a headset over my eyes, and I feel like I'm being watched. Now, I'm not one of those paranoid types, but the feeling was just too strong. So I take it off and decide that I've had enough of virtual reality for the day. For the next few days, I stayed away from it and spent more time with Kim. We'll fast forward a few more days, and it's the weekend, and Kim has to be away again. I prepare myself for another weekend without her. I get a call from a friend and he says there's a new bar that opened up across the street to where he lived and he wanted to check it out. We had a few drinks, chatted for a bit, and I went on my way. I figure it's only 11 p.m. and I have nothing to do tomorrow, so I think I'll finish the movie I left off. I wear the VR headset over my head and start the movie, but my gaze is suddenly directed towards my extreme left on the last seat of the row ahead of me. I see a liquid black. I recall the ink blot I'd seen over at the back and turned around, but it isn't there. Now I'm genuinely freaked out, and I just take it off. I decided that I'll contact the company about this first thing in the morning, assuming it's a glitch. So I wake up and contact them, and they asked me to come over to their help center. They checked it out and said it was fine. And it was. They said sometimes stuff happens that's really hard to pin down, and just fixes itself. I figured it was a fair enough explanation because that usually is how most electronics behave. Well satisfied with my visit, I return home. Now, I won't bullshit around and I'll cut to the chase. It was there again, but closer now. It sat just a few chairs behind me, and I could almost make out his features. It didn't seem like an ink blot anymore. I suddenly felt like someone touched the back of my neck and whispered in my ear. It was getting too real too soon, and I flung away the headset from my face and looked around. No one. Obviously, I was alone. I chuckled and thought how silly I was being and looked over the corner of the room. I seemed to have broken the headset. I frowned, thinking I wasted a lot of cash due to a little paranoia, but a little part of me was glad it broke. The weekend is up and I'm back spending time with Kim and working. We went to grab dinner after work, and I noticed something in my peripheral vision while I was eating. And it slowly becomes clear. It's an ink blot. Now, I'm not stupid. So I instantly made the connection and realized I wasn't even wearing the headset and flipped the fuck over. I tell Kim we're leaving and I pay at the front desk and leave. She asked me what that was all about and looked at me weird. I tell her to just be quiet for a while, and we go back to her place cause I'm certainly not staying at mine after what just happened. So here I am, scared shitless, and not sure what to do. Well, I'll update if anything happens.